Well, Bob's your uncle. It's another very exciting episode right here on the MIgardener channel. Can't believe I had to say that. But I did because you all suggested it. If you want to suggest some more fun, quirky ideas, let me know in the comments box below what your intro would be, and I might just pick it. Anyways, welcome back to another very exciting episode right here on the MIgardener channel. In today's episode, we're going to talk about what happens when your tomatoes fork. Now, this might not seem like a big issue, but if you're single stemming your tomatoes like we do, which is you take your tomatoes, you prune them to a single growth stem, you grow them up a stake, and you essentially keep things very neat and tidy so you can cram as many plants in a given space as possible, a fork can be a big dilemma. Now, if you're growing your tomatoes wild, letting them bush everywhere, caging them up, or Florida weaving them, it's not as much of a concern for you because the name of the game with those methods is just wild and crazy. But if you're keeping things neat and tidy, a fork can really be a trouble point for you when it comes to which one do I choose? What happens if I choose the wrong one? And where do I go from here? And a lot of people write to us asking what happens when their tomatoes fork. Now, the first reason why your tomato can fork is because you have a determinate tomato. Now, if you have a determinate tomato and you bought a determinate tomato, that's fine. You just don't want to prune those, and that's a different growing style. You want to grow those bushy because they're intended to grow bushy because everything about those plants are determined. They have a determined height, they set a determined amount of fruit, the fruit will ripen at a determined time. Everything is determined about that tomato, and that's why it's called a determinate. So if you have an indeterminate, that means that it's basically going to grow all season long. It's going to continue fruiting all season long. As long as the growing conditions are favorable, it'll continue to grow, continue to flower, continue to fruit, and the fruit will ripen at every different stage during the life cycle of the plant. So if you have an indeterminate and it forks, this is very common. This happens all the time. In fact, it happened to us, which is what prompted this video. And that's what I love about this channel is anytime I have something going on in my garden, I'm like, I can bring that to the masses. I can bring that to you and help you grow bigger, go home with it. So that's awesome. All right, so you'll notice here with this tomato plant that we have the main growth stem growing up. Right? This is the main stem. This right here is the main growth stem. But what happens as it gets closer to the top is something happens that we don't want, and that's a fork. Now, there's a proverbial fork in the road, and if we choose the wrong path, this can be very bad for the plant. Now, it won't be the end of the world for the plant, but it will severely inhibit its growth, its vigor, and its fruit yield. So you want to pick the right one. What you want to do is you want to wait for the plant once it forks to form a flower. The flower will always form first on the primary growth point. This is the most vigorous growth point on the plant, and you want to cull or pinch off and prune the least dominant. That's going to continue its growth habit. That's going to continue its growth pattern. It's going to continue to grow. Now, if you choose the wrong one, it will just simply grow slower. It might not fruit as much, and it might be a little bit shorter and stunted if you select the wrong one, but it still won't be the end of the world. This will then become the main dominant growth point. It will just take about 2 or 3 weeks for this one to take over as the dominant growth point. So what we want to do is just go up the plant, and I'll bring you guys in really close so you can see what I'm talking about. But basically, you have the main growth stem here, you have the fork. We let this go for about a week, and then when it forked, we waited for it to flower. Once it flowered, we saw which stem the flower was attached to, and that's the one we're going to keep. All right, so like I said, coming up the stem here, you'll notice the main growth stem coming on up. You got a main growth stem, and then, we got a fork. What are we going to do? Well, we let it go for about a week or so, about 2 weeks maybe, and it formed a flower stalk. You'll notice that the flower stalk is attached to this stem and not this one. And that's because the fork is favoring this one. You'll also notice that if I were to put them together, the one that has the flower is slightly taller, slightly more aggressive, slightly has a little bit more vigor, and that's because this is your dominant growth point here. So what we want to do is just simply come in here and carefully bend this until it snaps and treat it just like a sucker. A fork is essentially just an overgrown sucker, and there you go. Now, what this will do is this will select this to become the main growth stem. Sorry, it's so bright, 1 second. And so this will then become the main dominant growth point here, and it may fork again. You might have a tomato that forks 3 or 4 different times, but this will then become the next main growth point that this will grow up, and you can then train this up your stake and just continue to grow it vertically. Here we have another one. This is, again, another fork here. You'll notice that it's a fork because it actually has a little crease in the stem, and the stem then branches off, forms one, and forms two. And you can answer what you think is the dominant one based on which one has the flower. The flower is on this stem. And so we'll come in here and treat this just like a sucker. We'll come in here at the fork, treat it just like a sucker, pinch it off, and we're good to go. It's that simple, folks. It's that simple. There's really nothing too, crazy and earth-shattering about this. It's just very, very simple to do, and you just gotta wait for that flower to decide which one it goes on, and that's the one that you keep. So I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you learned something new. If you have any other questions on single stemming tomato plants, we have lots of videos on this topic, and it's a very simple thing to do, but it can really make all the difference in your garden when you're growing high intensity like this and you're growing so many tomatoes in such a small amount of space. Keeps them way more disease-free, helps them yield more, grow straighter, just keeps everything a lot cleaner and tidier, and it also allows you to interplant things like beans or carrots or herbs around these plants where there's no more foliage and there's actually open soil for you to plant. So really is a great benefit, but it can come with its question marks when a plant throws a curveball at you like a fork in the road. But very, very simple to alleviate. So I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you learned something new. As always, this is Luke from the MIgardener channel, reminding you to grow big or go home, and we'll catch you all later. See ya. Bye.